You ever feel that sudden punch in your chest? That moment when you realize something about yourself you've been avoiding? That's what today is about. And I need you to listen closely, because what I'm about to tell you isn't comfortable, but it will change the way you see yourself forever. There's a part of you, hidden, quiet, almost embarrassed to be seen, that you keep locked away. Not because it's weak, but because you were trained to believe that admitting certain truths makes you less of a man. And psychology has a brutal way of exposing this. The things we hide the most are usually the things controlling us the most. Let me ask you something, and answer honestly in your mind. How many times have you acted confident, calm, unbothered, while inside you were drowning? How many times did you pretend you didn't care when someone ignored your message, pulled away, changed their tone, or made you feel replaceable? You brushed it off, you kept your face straight, you played it cool. But deep down, you felt something you would never dare to admit. This is the embarrassing truth most men never face. You feel more than you allow yourself to express. Not because you're emotional, but because you're human. And the more you deny it, the more those unspoken emotions quietly sabotage your confidence, your relationships, and your entire sense of self-worth. Here's the psychological twist. The mind does not care how strong you pretend to be. It only responds to what you actually feel. Suppressed emotions don't disappear. They leak out through overthinking, through jealousy, through attachment, through silence, through anger you swear has nothing to do with her. And here's where it gets even more uncomfortable. The very thing you're hiding is the very thing that would make you more powerful if you stopped being ashamed of it. Because the moment a man can look at his own emotions without fear or judgment, he becomes dangerous in the best way, calm, grounded, impossible to manipulate. You've been taught that vulnerability is weakness. Psychology says the opposite. Awareness is power. Self-honesty is power. Emotional clarity is power. You've spent years pretending to be stronger than you feel. Now it's time to become stronger because you finally know what you feel. There's a moment every man goes through, though most will never admit it out loud. A moment where something tiny, something stupid hits harder than it should. Maybe she took too long to reply. Maybe she seemed distant. Maybe she laughed a little too easily at someone else's joke. It's nothing, and yet it stings. And instead of acknowledging the sting, you bury it. You tell yourself you're tripping, overthinking, being dramatic. But psychology calls this avoidance what it truly is, a survival habit you learned long before adulthood. Here's the embarrassing part most men never uncover. You weren't taught emotional awareness. You were taught emotional silence. You weren't taught to process fear, insecurity, or anxiety. You were taught to hide it, outrun it, or drown it. Society told you that you should be unshakable, unbeatable, unaffected. So now when something rattles you, you don't know how to deal with it. So you deny that you feel anything at all, and that denial becomes your enemy. Because when a man refuses to face what hurts him, he becomes controlled by what he won't acknowledge. You think you're being tough by brushing it off. You think you're being stoic by ignoring it, but your subconscious is keeping score. Every time you pretend something didn't bother you, a part of you learns that your emotions don't matter, and the more you ignore them, the more they build pressure beneath the surface, shaping your behavior without your permission. That's why you get attached too quickly. That's why you shut down too easily. That's why you walk away from good women or chase bad ones. You're not broken. You're unaware. Here's the psychology behind the embarrassment. When you hide your emotions, you literally train your brain to believe they're dangerous. You train your body to tense up, your mind to overanalyze, your confidence to shrink. And suddenly you're not responding to the world as a man. You're reacting to it as someone constantly trying to protect himself from being seen. But here's the part no one tells you. Awareness doesn't make you soft. It makes you stable. A man who can recognize what he feels without being ruled by it becomes unshakable. He becomes unpredictable in the best possible way, calm in situations that once triggered him, clear in moments that once confused him, confident where he used to crumble. There's a pattern I need you to see, because once you recognize it, your entire life starts making sense. Every man has a moment where he thinks, why am I reacting like this? Why does this bother me so much? And you start believing something is wrong with you. You start assuming you're too sensitive, too emotional, too insecure. But here's the truth you were never supposed to know. Your reactions aren't the problem. Your lack of understanding of them is. Psychology shows that the mind hates uncertainty more than pain. Think about that. Your brain would rather feel hurt than feel confused. That's why the unknown gets under your skin so deeply. When she changes her tone, when she pulls away, when her behavior doesn't match her words, your brain panics. Not because you're weak, but because your mind needs patterns, clarity, and predictability to feel safe. And when something disrupts that, your brain fills in the blanks with the worst possible narrative. This is where the embarrassing part comes in. You start imagining things she never said. You start replaying conversations, analyzing emojis, guessing intentions. Not because you're clingy, but because your mind is trying to protect you from the unknown by creating a story, even if the story hurts you. You don't want to admit it, but the truth is simple. You're afraid of losing something you haven't even fully claimed yet, and that fear reveals the part of you that feels unworthy, unseen, or replaceable. But here's the twist. You're not reacting to her. You're reacting to every moment in your past where you felt overlooked, ignored, or forgotten. She's just the trigger for an old wound you've never addressed. And here's where psychology becomes powerful. Once you realize most of your emotional pain isn't about the present moment, you stop taking everything so personally. You stop making every shift in energy feel like a threat. You stop assuming every silence means something is wrong with you. You gain control. Because a man who understands his triggers becomes unstoppable. Not because he avoids emotion, but because he understands where it comes from. And when you know the source of your reactions, you stop overreacting, you stop chasing validation, you stop letting fear dictate your decisions. You become calm, centered, grounded. And that version of you, the version who responds with clarity instead of insecurity, is the man that every woman notices, respects, and gravitates toward without even knowing why. There's something you've never been told, and it's the reason so many men feel constantly misunderstood, undervalued, or emotionally invisible. You've been conditioned to believe that strength means silence, that the less you say, the less you feel, the more in control you appear. But the truth is harsh. Silence doesn't make you strong. Silence makes you misunderstood, even by yourself. Psychology has a word for what you've been doing most of your life: emotional masking. It's when you hide your real feelings, not because you want to, but because you believe no one will understand them, respect them, or respond to them in a way that feels safe. And over time, that mask becomes so normal that you start forgetting what's underneath it. But here's the dangerous part. When you mask your emotions for too long, your mind stops differentiating between what you actually feel and what you pretend to feel. You lose your ability to recognize your own needs, your own boundaries, even your own limits. And that's when you start tolerating things you shouldn't, staying where you're not appreciated, giving where you're not valued, chasing where you should be withdrawing. This isn't weakness. This is self-abandonment disguised as strength. You're not embarrassed because you feel too much. You're embarrassed because you've been pretending for so long that you don't know how to express what's real without fearing judgment or rejection. But here's the truth you need to hear. Expressing your emotions doesn't make you less of a man. It makes you more in control of yourself. When a man can articulate what bothers him without exploding, when he can set boundaries without fear, when he can stand firm in what he feels without apologizing for it, he becomes a different kind of powerful. Women can sense this difference instantly. Friends respect it without fully understanding why. Strangers notice it in your posture, your tone, your decisions. Because emotional clarity creates confidence that doesn't need to be performed. It's quiet, solid, unshakable. And once you take off the mask, something incredible happens. You stop letting embarrassment dictate your behavior. You stop hiding your truth. You stop confusing silence with strength. You stop shrinking to keep the peace. You start showing up as the man you were always supposed to become: aware, grounded, emotionally intelligent, and fully aligned with who you are, not who you're pretending to be. And here's where psychology becomes powerful. Once you realize most of your emotional pain isn't about the present moment, you stop taking everything so personally. You stop making every shift in energy feel like a threat. You stop assuming every silence means something is wrong with you. You gain control, because a man who understands his triggers becomes unstoppable, not because he avoids emotion, but because he understands where it comes from. And when you know the source of your reactions, you stop overreacting. You stop chasing validation. You stop letting fear dictate your decisions. You become calm, centered, grounded, and that version of you, the version who responds with clarity instead of insecurity, is the man that every woman notices, respects, and gravitates toward without even knowing why. There's a moment in every man's life when he realizes something unsettling, the embarrassment he's been running from, has been running his life, not consciously, not loudly, but quietly in the background, controlling his reactions, shaping his choices, and pulling him toward people and situations that echo the very wounds he never addressed. You think embarrassment is just a feeling. It's not. It's a mirror, revealing the parts of you you've been afraid to look at. Think about the times you've changed who you were just to avoid looking foolish. The times you agreed to things you didn't want, just so you wouldn't seem difficult. The times you swallowed your discomfort because you were scared of being too emotional, too needy, or too sensitive. Every one of those moments was driven by the same hidden fear, the fear of being exposed. And here's the psychological reality. When a man fears being exposed, he becomes predictable, controllable, easily influenced. Not because he lacks strength, but because he's fighting the wrong battle. He's trying to protect his image instead of protecting his peace. He's trying to look unbothered instead of actually being unbothered. He's trying to appear strong instead of building strength from the inside out. Embarrassment makes you hesitate when you should speak. It makes you chase when you should pause. It makes you accept when you should walk away. It convinces you that silence keeps you safe, when all it really does is keep you small. But here's the breakthrough, the moment where everything shifts. When you stop running from the things that embarrass you, something powerful happens. Your confidence stops depending on performance. Your worth stops depending on how others see you. Your energy becomes steady instead of fragile. And suddenly, people, women especially, sense a different presence in you, a groundedness, a calm strength, a man who's not ashamed of his own humanity. Because a man who can say, yes, that bothered me, or yes, that hurt, or no, I don't accept that, isn't weak. He's free. And freedom has an energy that can't be faked. This is when relationships stop feeling like emotional landmines, when dating stops feeling like a battlefield, when you stop feeling the urge to prove anything to anyone. The embarrassment you once hid becomes the wisdom you carry. The shame you once avoided becomes the clarity that guides you. You stop reacting, you start choosing, you start leading yourself, finally. Here's the truth that finally ties everything together. The embarrassment you've been taught to avoid isn't your weakness. It's your doorway. The moments you feel exposed, insecure, or unsure aren't signs that you're failing as a man. They're signals that something inside you is asking to be understood, not ignored. And once you learn to listen instead of hide, your entire identity shifts. Because here's what no one teaches men. Emotional awareness isn't about becoming softer, it's about becoming solid. When you stop pretending nothing bothers you, you start building real resilience. When you stop dismissing your insecurities, you start transforming them. And when you stop trying to be unaffected, you become someone who can face complexity without falling apart. Imagine going through life without constantly second-guessing yourself. Imagine not feeling that tightness in your chest when someone pulls away. Imagine hearing a tone shift, seeing a delayed reply, or noticing distance, and instead of spiraling, you stay calm, centered, clear. That's not fantasy. That's the version of you that emerges when you stop letting embarrassment control the narrative. Because the truth is, embarrassment isn't about what others think of you. It's about what you secretly think of yourself. And the moment you confront those beliefs, everything changes. You stop interpreting other people's behavior as judgments against your worth. You stop assuming every shift in energy is your fault. You stop tying your masculinity to how well you can hide your emotions. Instead, you step into a different kind of power, the kind that comes from knowing yourself so deeply that no one's behavior shakes your foundation, the kind of power that makes you attractive without trying, respected without forcing, and calm without pretending. This is the evolution of a man, Not the one society expects, but the one your soul has been asking for. A man who doesn't fold when something triggers him. A man who doesn't run from his own truth. A man who isn't embarrassed to be human. And now I want to ask you something. Something only a man brave enough to grow will answer. What is the one emotion you've been hiding the most? And why? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this spoke to you, if it opened something in you, then make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with a friend who needs to hear it today.